So, you guys all know this video, right? It's a pretty popular video, you know, like 212,000 views. Pretty crazy shit. I never expected this video to pop off as much as it did. And I kind of regret a lot of decisions in this video. It kind of bugs me that it did get so popular because I feel like there's a lot of shit writing, in all honesty. Yeah, so I think I've been putting this off long enough. I've been wanting to go over this video for a long time on stream, point out the issues I have with it. I've written, let's see if I can show this. Yeah, I've written 3 pages of notes on the video. So, I got a lot to say. My credentials are that I'm a loser who's played this game a lot. I've beaten the whole thing without guns, but I've also beaten the game without dying a single time. So I needed intimate knowledge of every mission and the best and most reliable strategies in order to beat the game deathless. So when doing these deathless attempts, I really had to get to know the game and figure out the most reliable way to beat each mission. Because if I was relying on luck to beat these missions, I would have failed a lot more times than I did. I had to figure out the best strategies for each mission. I had to rely on my own skill in order to beat it. I couldn't rely on luck. So I need to start this out by saying this video isn't very good. The basis of the argument is flimsy at best, attacking a straw man position that I didn't prove anyone had. Going into writing this, my goal was to discredit this position instead of being fully truthful, which is why I didn't give examples of people's positions or fully explore the possibilities of the moveset. The goal of this video was to discredit the jump spin shoot move in Jak 2. I was sick of this move being used all the time, since Jak 2's combat has depth that is really fun to learn, but most people don't take the time to learn it. The title, thumbnail, and tone of the video was purposefully antagonistic and controversial in order for people to click on the video and watch it through. I don't necessarily regret this, as, you know, you gotta play the YouTube game after all, though the tone of the voice delivery and writing could have been handled better, especially if I had strong arguments to justify this attitude, which I did not. This had the unintended side effect of making most of the comments on the video really pretentious and snobby, completely my fault as that was my attitude. If you scroll down into the comments, you'll notice a lot of people, there's a lot of politeness and stuff, but there's a lot of people being like, I can't believe people are so stupid they didn't figure this out. I figured this out when I was 9. There's a lot of dumb shit like that. In equal part, there's a lot of oh, I didn't realize this was a thing. I'm going to try this in my new playthrough. I really like those comments. Yeah, but there's a lot of there's a lot of yeah, pretentiousness in the comments. Completely my own fault. That's the kind of the vibe of the video. So lastly, I want to say that I do largely agree with the takeaway of this video. I do think the jump spin shoot is a poor strategy, and players should take the time to learn the mechanics of the game. My issues with this video is that I wasn't fully truthful about the move's capabilities. I never took into consideration the reasons people might have gravitated towards the spinning move, and the argument had a really weak base. Alright, I think it's time to start watching the video. Let's go! I think it'll be a little bit louder. Everyone always goes on about how hard Jak 2 is, and often in reviews of the game, it's one of the biggest criticisms. Oh, there's not enough checkpoints. Oh, the game is unfair at times. I'm here to tell you that you're all playing the game wrong. Do you notice the really condescending, sort of up my own arse attitude I had at the beginning of this? It's kind of to provoke people to be like, oh, who does this guy think he is? You know, so I'm trying to get people to keep on watching because I've sort of, offended them or whatever. That was kind of the goal of the approach here. Cause let me ask you, when you watch these reviews from the people who criticize the difficulty, or maybe when you play the game yourself, what is the one common thing that you see? Jump, spin, shoot. Every time. I see reviewers say this is the dominant strategy of the game, meaning it's the optimal way to play and there's no other strategy better to use, but also say how hard the game is. If you fall into the— Okay. Right there, I think this isn't good. This is very not good. What I did was I showed 3 different creators, their videos on the game, and I essentially lumped their opinions into one position, and that's what I'm attacking in this video. When the 3 of them don't share the exact same opinion, and I didn't fully go into what they actually think. If I was to make this video again today, I probably wouldn't actually go down this route like using creators' examples. But if I was to use other people's videos as examples, I would actually show their video, have them speak out what their position on the move is in their video, and then attack it, which is what we're about to do. Not necessarily attack it, but we're going to show each of these videos and what their actual positions are. So the first one here is Mighty Nifty. There we go. Okay.
So clearly, based on everything I just said, you're not going to be punching stuff for the majority of the game. So what will you be using to murder the waves of enemies coming your way? Well, that's where the most significant change to the series comes in, because it's time to grab your gun. After the first couple of hours, Jack is handed a morph gun that's capable of changing the way it fires depending on which upgrades have been equipped. At first, it's just the scattergun, a shotgun-like short-range weapon good for crowd control, but eventually you'll unlock more mods that have various applications. There's the blaster, a long-range semi-auto weapon useful for sniping at a distance, the Vulcan Fury machine gun capable of firing tons of rounds in a short time, and the Peacemaker used to deal large amounts of damage in a single shot. Given these descriptions, you may think that these firearms would lead to a ton of variety in the game's combat, granting both depth and versatility. You would be wrong. Like Dark Jack, there are two major issues with the gunplay that make it more tedious than fun: the controls and dominant strategy. Starting with the controls, Jak 2 plays kind of like a top-down twin-stick shooter, but with an over-the-shoulder camera. See, once again, moving the right stick up and down zooms the camera closer to or further from Jak, rather than aiming a reticle up or down. In fact, there are no reticles in the entire game. Instead, Jak aims his gun in whatever direction his body is currently facing, with auto-aim taking over for the Z-axis. And honestly, the auto-aim in this game is pretty stellar. For the most part, the bullets go where I expect them to when I point Jak towards an enemy. Unfortunately, getting Jak to point towards the enemy is the real issue. The problem is twofold. First, Jak is unable to strafe, meaning that you can't reposition yourself to get away from enemies while still firing in that direction, leading to a lot of combat encounters that devolve into shooting a couple of times, running away to get some distance, shooting some more, rinse and repeat. If I wanted to play red light, green light, I'd fucking play red light, green light, but this is not how you design shooting controls.
Okay, so it's not exactly wrong here. Jak 2's design in terms of its controls with its shooting isn't exactly conventional. It is designed with a platformer control set, first and foremost, and they added guns on top of that. However, in my opinion, the guns themselves and the way the level design and enemy design is set up in a way that it doesn't really matter too much that you can't aim exactly 100% accurately. Lack of strafing isn't really a big deal because a lot of the levels don't really require you to like move like that. It's not a Ratchet and Clank level. It's not a Ratchet and Clank game. A lot of the enemies like come towards you and you can just shoot them as they're coming towards you. A lot of them are just like, so like with the blaster he just showed right here. You kind of just stand there and shoot because they're right in front of you. They're not coming in from like each side, and they're not coming up from behind. You don't need to like make any quick reflexes or movements or like anything like that. Yeah, so I don't really have a lot to say on this. He's not exactly wrong. You can't aim it 100% accurately because it's not set up like a traditional third-person shooter. However, I do want to point out this one bit here.
You can't reposition yourself to get away from enemies while still firing in that direction, leading to a lot of combat encounters that devolve into shooting a couple of times, running away to get some distance, shooting some more, rinse and repeat.
You notice how like he says that, but he doesn't show that happening. He just shows how you would play in this scenario. You take your distance and shoot from a distance. Like this is like what you would do. He's not moving up towards them and then coming back to get some distance and then rinse and repeat, because he's not doing that. So I don't know why he's showing a clip where he's playing it like well.
If I wanted to play red light, green light, I'd fucking play red light, green light, but this is not how you design shooting controls. Even worse, turning Jak the tiniest amount can have a drastic effect on where you're currently aiming. While turning Jak 15
okay, so hold on,
degrees
I'll
may
let
not
this
make
go
a difference when firing at an enemy 3 feet away, with the difference only being about 3/4 of a foot for the bullet's endpoint. If an enemy happens to be about 30 feet away, this simple turn means the bullet travels nearly 8 feet further than the original spot. And when aiming...
Yes, none of this is wrong. None of this is wrong.
relies on turning the character themselves to face the enemies you're trying to dodge, it becomes exceedingly difficult to hit a target accurately, no matter how good the auto-aim is. When you get down to it, the controls for this game are designed more like a platformer than a third-person shooter, and it really shows.
So this footage here, it's an example of like this aiming being like jank or whatever. The thing is, not every scenario is meant for the blaster. In a situation like this, you're better off using something like the scattergun because there's a lot of enemies right in front of you, and you don't have to aim particularly well with the scattergun. Or what you should really be doing, because this mission is kind of built for it, is you go in with the Vulcan Fury and you spray every enemy in front of you, and you will be hitting like all of them. The blaster isn't made for every scenario, and it doesn't need to be 100% accurate because it's only made for like specific scenarios.
So how about the second issue of dominant strategy? Well, for 90% of the game, there's one move that most players will be using. Jump, spin, and shoot the blaster. That's it, the winning strategy. And once you realize it's the winning strategy, it makes all the versatility the other guns might have offered completely worthless. But let's go through them one by one to make sure. The scattergun's issues are similar to those of Darkjack, where its short range limits its usefulness to immense hordes of metalheads, meaning that once the blaster is unlocked, there's rarely a situation in which it's useful.
Here's the problem. He just said the scattergun is only useful for immense hordes of metalheads, and once you get the blaster, it's useless. Which isn't true, because you'll be facing metalheads for the entire game. It's not like as soon as you get the blaster, metalheads stop appearing in the game. Let's listen to that again, hold on.
Make sure. The scattergun's issues are similar to those of Darkjack, where its short range limits its usefulness to immense hordes of metalheads, meaning that once the blaster is unlocked, there's rarely a situation in which it's useful. Maybe if it were more powerful than the scattergun or had more ammo, it could be a worthy part of the arsenal, but as it is, it's...
You see, he keeps showing instances where the gun is very useful. He just annihilated like 7 guards with like 4 shots. And if you wanted to do that with the blaster, you'd have to spray like fucking 20. And yeah, like, because the scattergun like whoosh, knocks enemies around, it just knocks them all into the water.
Only practical application is to teach shooting mechanics before the better gun comes along. The Vulcan Fury could be useful for dispatching large groups of enemies when surrounded or dealing massive damage to a boss, but it runs out of ammo so quickly and deals so little damage that its use for crowd control is limited, and takes so long to charge up to full speed that you're likely to get hit by an attack if using it in a boss fight.
So this is something I go into in the video itself. You know, hitting an enemy and then firing the Vulcan puts it at full speed immediately. The running out of ammo isn't really a big deal if you're actually like using the guns, all of the guns properly. If you just see what I feel like he's approaching all these weapons for is if I use this one weapon for every scenario and then I hit a roadblock or an issue comes about, oh, that's why the gun is bad. So I would agree that you would run out of ammo pretty damn quick if the only gun you're using is the Vulcan Fury. But if you are using all the guns, you're not going to run out of ammo for the Vulcan very often, because like ammo pickups are plentiful for all the guns. It's pretty balanced which ammo pickups you're going to get in the game. And yes, like he says, the scattergun is good for large crowds of enemies. That's like its most useful use case, as well as like really like enemies with a lot of HP, like spider gunners or whatever.
Then there's the Peacemaker. This weapon should be perfect for dealing huge amounts of damage to enemies and bosses, and it is. However, most enemies go down in a few hits anyway, meaning it's better to save your Peacemaker ammo for one of the few boss fights in the game, and even then, this mod is only unlocked in the final hours, making it barely worth talking about. Meanwhile,
I don't think that's too harsh of a criticism. I'm not ignoring Twitch chat, I'm ignoring all of chat because I'm trying to talk. The Peacemaker does come in pretty late in the game. I'd argue it functions... Oh, I'm missing a thing. Thank you, Beam Reflexer. I will get to stuff like that later. The Peacemaker does come in quite late in the game, and it doesn't really have objective use cases like the other 3 guns. But the Peacemaker is more like it's more like sort of Darkjack, where like if you're overwhelmed or there's a large group of enemies, you can just throw it out and that makes your life a bit easier. It's a lot like the BFG in Doom. The BFG doesn't have like objective use cases, but like it's just good to like use when you've got the ammo for it, of which the ammo is rare, like the Peacemaker.
While the blaster can fire at a long range, has no charge-up time, deals a decent amount of damage, has plentiful ammo, and can be used for crowd control thanks to the spin move and the game's fantastic auto-aim, all leading to this weapon being the only one players are likely to use for a majority of the game. It's a real shame too, as each one does feel unique to use, and there's a lot of potential here. Swapping between mods is seamless, and each one feels fantastic to fire, like it really has a kick. I just wish there were more of a reason to actually use them all. Plus, like most shooters, each gun...
Okay, so he goes on to talk about the clip, like the visual of the clip and how it's kind of useless, which I kind of agree with. It just kind of looks cool. But...
to use for a majority of... charge-up time, deals a decent amount of damage, has plentiful ammo, and can be used for crowd control thanks to the spin move and the game's fantastic auto-aim, all leading to this weapon being the only one players are likely to use for a majority of the game.
So he goes on to say this, however, if we go later on in the video, so this video is broken up by chunks, so like the first lot of it is like, you know, the background, the story, and stuff like that. This part here with the guns is in gameplay, and then next is level design, then mission design, bosses, world design. I'm going to talk about a clip from mission design next, because it kind of goes hand in hand with the jump, spin, shoot analysis he's giving.
No, the troubles come in when discussing the worst of the worst. You know the ones: escort missions, poorly implemented design choices, and buggy or otherwise infuriating missions with unfair difficulty spikes and hardly any checkpoints? Yeah, let's discuss a few of those. First would be the escort missions, in which Jack is tasked with protecting an NPC with limited health. These include protecting Samos in the forest, leading young Jack through the city, and holding off the metalheads while the sages lift a massive object onto Bruder's airship. While the enemy types and locations may differ here, they all boil down to the same thing: jump, spin, and shoot until you finally make it through the waves of enemies headed your way. These hordes are relentless, and even with a winning attack strategy, fending them off still feels like a crapshoot. The fight in the...
Do you notice what the problem with that is? He's claiming the jump, spin, shoot is the winning strategy, but if it was really the winning strategy, he would be winning in those missions. But he's not. This whole part of the video is talking about like really hard missions and how bullshit they are. But look at his strategy. It's just hoping for the best.
Onto Bruder's airship. While the enemy types and locations may differ here, they all boil down to the same thing: jump, spin, and shoot until you finally make it through the waves of enemies headed your way. These hordes are relentless, and even with a winning attack strategy, fending them off still feels like a crapshoot.
Yeah, that is a really poor argument. If it really was the winning strategy, you wouldn't have a problem with it. Therein lies the problem. It's not the winning strategy. It's a strategy that's reliant on luck. You're not actually using your own skill to get past these missions. Just like Big Russell Man in chat says, the scattergun is terrific for this mission. The Vulcan Fury can also see its use if you really want. The blaster can see its use if you really want. But because of the fact that like there's a lot of enemies, and a lot of them are small and hard to hit, like hard to aim, the scattergun does a really good job. And also because like the scattergun flings enemies back with like the grunts, the scattergun does a really good job at keeping every enemy away from Samos. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say about this part.
The fight in the forest is particularly irritating because the flying guards are incredibly difficult to properly aim at without a way to aim upwards. Plus, if you die at any point, you have to restart each of these missions from the very beginning.
Okay, I think this is the point where he just talks about checkpoints. I just wanted to say real quick, where the hell would you put a checkpoint in this mission? It's like 2 minutes long. They just walk across... Like I don't get it. Where would you put a checkpoint there? Yeah. Okay. So that's mighty nifty. He actually left a comment on my video. How do I show this? I'm not sure you guys can really see that. I think it might be too blurry. I'll just read it out. So he left a comment on my video, basically summarizing his position. So, as someone whose video was featured here, I'd like to clarify some things. First, I didn't play the game exclusively by jump spinning. Maybe. My complaint was that the spin strategy works 90% of the time, which is boring and repetitive. That and the Crimson Guards have really good aim after the first few shots, discouraging from getting up close. I don't remember him saying that in the clips we just watched, but we didn't watch the full video, so maybe he did. I don't recall him saying that though. Even still, that isn't really true. The whole thing with the Crimson Guards is that they'll miss the first few shots and then they'll pretty much get a guaranteed hit. The goal of the Crimson Guards is to hit them and stun them before they land a shot. So getting up close isn't really a big deal. And then he goes on to talk about his other issues with the game, like the tone and we can like have like a, you know, a good discussion about analysis and stuff, but when someone is taking this to an analysis, I hate when randomized NPCs block off small pathway, sometimes making missions literally impossible, not exaggerating. When you're saying like a mission is literally impossible, I don't really take that, I can't really take you seriously after that. He says it in the video at some point as well. At some point here, I think he's talking about the Errol race or something. I don't know, but if you're saying like the game is literally impossible, maybe you're just not playing it good enough. If I can beat the whole game in a single go without dying, I'm sure it's going to be possible. Also, with like randomized NPCs, it's kind of just a way of like keeping you on your toes, like making sure you have fast reflexes. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Anyway, that's mighty nifty. It's a long video. I think there is like some decent critique in it, but I disagree with like most of it. The next one is Ant Dude. This is quite an old video, so I'm not going to really go too hard on it because it's really old. But this is like the main video I kind of had in my head when I was writing this video, so.
In all seriousness, the gunplay actually fits in just fine. Well, kinda. There's the red one that goes whoosh, the yellow one that goes ping, the blue one that also pings but really, really, really fast, and the purple one that shoots an electrical ball of destruction. Delicious. You get these guns along with ammo upgrades throughout the entire game, and it is satisfying to kill enemies and collect metalhead eggs to power up Darkjack, but there is a bit of a problem here. The game throws a lot of enemies at you, and you have no invincibility frames after you get hit. Isn't that one of the cardinal gaming rules that you're not supposed to break? To remedy this, however, the game basically makes it mandatory that you almost always jump, spin, and shoot the yellow gun, throwing your shots in all directions. Whether or not they actually hit the enemies, though, is sometimes left up to chance. You could try and use different methods of attacking to get out of a tough spot, but ultimately, if you don't have enough juice to go dark, you're gonna end up using that one method over and 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 over. Sure, it makes things easier and you're bound to have a favorite gun anyway, and that yellow one is probably going to be the one. But if you have this toolbox of abilities and only one of them is used for the tough situations, that's bad.
Okay, yeah, so yellow gun spin shoot is best strategy. If you do find it like the best strategy and it's the only one you're going to use, yeah, it kind of would be a shame that all the other guns are kind of useless. But it's not the best strategy for a lot of missions. It can definitely get you out of some tough spots, but he then goes on later in the video to like talk about how agonizingly difficult the game can be. So, you know, last one real quick. I got to get back to the actual video we got to watch. I just wanted to be completely 100% honest and transparent with the clips and the videos I was using, because I wasn't in the video. Also, the way I timestamped this, careful of the Yui jump scare.
Now that we've been better acquainted with our new boomstick, we're off with this guy, Sig, for another pointless endeavour. Thankfully, you're now equipped with the Morph Gun, a gun that can be upgraded so that it can pretty much become a different gun at a moment's notice. For now, we're stuck with the Scattergun, which is literally another name for a shotgun. The firing rate isn't very dependable, it doesn't do much damage, and its range is short, meaning it isn't extremely effective. The Scattergun works better as a complement to your melee abilities and the other weapons you get later. In fact, there's actually only 4 guns available, as well.
So their comments on the scattergun, I don't agree with, because yeah, it's not exactly true. So
which is literally another name for a shotgun. The firing rate isn't very dependable.
The firing rate is actually extremely fast once you get the rate of fire upgrade, which is not very far in the game. A lot of people seem to miss this, which is something I notice a lot.
It doesn't do much damage, and its range is short, meaning it isn't extremely effective.
No, it's just not extremely effective in certain scenarios. Its short range and its wide range is very effective against certain enemies in certain scenarios.
Scattergun works better as a complement to your...
Also, I just wanted to say real quick, Remy did also comment on this video of mine. admitting that the video wasn't great. So I'm not going too hard against them, but yeah, again, I'm just trying to be transparent with the clips I showed.
Melee abilities and the other weapons you get later. In fact, there's actually only 4 guns available. As well as the scattergun, there's the blaster, which is pretty much just a rifle, the Vulcan barrel, which has a high fire rate but low damage output, and the Peacemaker, which shoots a big charge shot that also shocks enemies nearby. To be frank, while all the guns have their uses throughout the game, you'll probably find yourself using the blaster a lot. It's accurate, relatively powerful, has a lot of bullets, and you can do this with it. There's a reason for this, and in game theory it's known as strategic dominance. But that's just a theory. This is the theory that when a player discovers a particular strategy or move within a game and it works better than any other strategy, the player will continue to use that strategy, ignoring all other techniques that the player may have access to. In Jak 2, jumping, spinning, and pressing fire with the blaster equipped is the dominant strategy. You'll probably end up doing it a lot because the game is very difficult. You can only withstand about 4 hits until you die, 8 from smaller enemies. That's not so bad. What makes it bad is the fact that you're constantly surrounded by enemies who attack the second they get close, and there are very few invincibility frames after getting hit, which means, well, you're going to be dying a lot. Using the spin kick
Okay, so a couple things. Claiming that the reason you'll be using the jump spin shoot is because the game is very difficult. It's not really true, because they then go on to say you'll be dying a lot. So maybe if you weren't using the jump spin shoot, you wouldn't be dying so much. But also, it's not exactly true. There are certainly missions where this is the case, but it's not exactly true that you will be surrounded a lot in the game. If you take your time, I notice a lot of people kind of rush through the missions. Like, they'll get to a combat encounter and just like keep moving forwards, and then enemies are surrounding them on all sides because they haven't killed all the enemies that came first. Yeah, so if you just take your time with the combat, you won't get surrounded so easily.
What makes it bad is the fact that you're constantly surrounded by enemies who attack the second they get close.
Yeah, see what I mean?
Like, bad. What makes it bad is the fact
they're
that
running
you're constantly
towards
surrounded
the
by
enemies
who attack the second they get close.
And they got attacked because they didn't take them out from a distance. That's sort of what I mean. People seem to like really rush into this game. I'm not really sure why.
And there are very few invincibility frames after getting hit, which means, well, you're going to be dying a lot. Using the spin kick, shooty, whatever works best, but even then you don't know what enemy is going to be hit, let alone whether or not it'll even hit it. The combat can be fun when it works.
Which is why the move isn't good. It's too reliant on luck.
But more often than not, you just get caught in scenarios where your health drops to 0 quicker than you can say too edgy for me. The game isn't always
Okay, that's pretty much it. Wasn't that fun? We got to watch and shit on some other people's videos, and now we get to do the same on mine. So I pretty much just went through all that in the interest of being transparent. My video did a really bad thing, which is talk about people's positions without actually showing what their positions were. Their positions are pretty similar, but they weren't exactly 100% the same. I don't think any of them claimed what I was claiming, which is that the game is too hard, jump, spin, shoot is the winning strategy, which is kind of like two contradictory things. If the game is too hard, jump, spin, shoot... Well, if the jump, spin, shoot was the winning strategy, the game wouldn't be too hard. Actually, you know what? Mighty Nifty fucking... that was kind of their position, wasn't it? It's like, oh, even with the winning strategy, it's a crapshoot. Well, it's not the winning strategy then. Well, anyway, let's get back to my video, the worst one.
When you watch these reviews from the people who criticize the difficulty, or maybe when you play the game yourself, what is the one common thing that you see? Jump, spin, shoot. Every time. I see reviewers say this is the dominant strategy of the game, meaning it's the optimal way to play and there's no other strategy better to use, but also say how hard the game is. If you fall into this category, I'm here to tell you you're playing the game wrong. Now when I say you're playing the game wrong, I mainly mean the gunplay and combat, the stuff you'll be doing most of the time. When it comes to things like the races and stuff like that, yeah, those are very challenging, but they just take a lot of practice. First things first, stop doing this. Not only does this make your footage look terrible, but it also just does not help a lot of the time. To prepare for this video, I played through the entire game doing this. Every single encounter I just used this strategy, and once I ran out of ammo with the blaster, I did it with the other guns. This is how I played through the entire game. Now I will admit, there were a few stages where I did perfectly fine, but some stages were really difficult to get past using this strategy, so just stop.
This isn't a lie, I actually did play through the whole game like this. That was actually before I decided to make this video. I was watching videos like Mighty Nifties and stuff like that, talking about the jump spin shoot. And I was like, you know what? I haven't used the jump spin shoot since I was like a kid. So let's see how like actually good it is, because I used to use it a lot as a kid. And yeah, there was definitely a lot of missions where it was like, okay, sure. Run out of ammo a lot. Like you chew through ammo really quickly, but I guess it worked if you try hard enough. But there was plenty of missions where I just got fucking stuck for ages because it's a shit move. So, yeah, not good strategy.
Before we go through each gun, let's take a look at Jack's combat capabilities overall. Jack's base moveset has a couple attacks: the forward lunging punch, a spin kick which does damage all around him, an uppercut, and a ground slam. Admittedly, the uppercut and ground slam aren't the most useful moves for combat, but they are handy additions that do see their uses. Jack sports 4 guns: the Scattergun, Blaster, Vulcan Fury, and the Peacemaker. Each have their own uses, which I'll get into later, but what I love about these weapons is the fact that they integrate with Jack's moves. The game encourages you to play aggressively, get up close with your enemies, and take them out quickly. This is the case because each gun, aside from the Peacemaker, can be comboed with Jack's punch or spin to make things quicker and deadlier. If you hit an enemy then fire with the Scattergun, it skips the slow reload animation. When hitting an enemy then firing with the Blaster, it shoots 3 shots in rapid succession, which devastates most enemies. And when hitting an enemy then firing the Vulcan Fury, it skips the slow-ass wind-up and starts firing at full speed right away. These moves...
Do you notice that like none of the videos we went over talked about these moves? It kind of frustrates me that like that's actually another thing that made me want to make this video, because like I hadn't really seen anyone talking about this aspect of the gunplay, is that comboing it with your melee attacks makes the guns like way more effective. But no, jump spin shoot is the best move, and then you get stuck.
Will prove themselves to be essential when playing this game. Not only do they have awesome damage output by combining melee attacks with your weapons, but they also stun the enemies really effectively, so there's no way for them to counterattack. Okay, so now we're going to go through each gun and discuss their uses and when it's appropriate to use them. The Scattergun is low-key my favorite gun in the game. It is super versatile and there's plenty of scenarios where using it is the best strategy. While it does start very slow when you first get it, once you get the rate of fire upgrade, that problem goes away. This isn't to say that you should use this gun for every enemy, but it's surprising how much use you can get out of it when a lot of people say it's the worst gun in the game. The Scattergun fires a short-ranged but extremely wide shot. This means you don't need to be very accurate as long as you're pointing in the enemy's general direction. What this also means is it can damage multiple enemies at once, which is great news when you're encountering a lot of small one-hit enemies. These kinds of...
You see that? You see how there was like 10 enemies there?
It can damage multiple enemies at once, which is great news when you're encountering a lot...
Look how many there are. There's a lot of enemies there. They're all small and they're all fast, so they are really hard to aim at, but...
of small one-hit enemies.
One shot and they're all dead. But the scattergun's useless, everyone.
These kinds of enemies love to spawn in groups, and they're often pretty slippery bastards.
Yeah, you see this mission? Oh, this is such a crapshoot with the winning
strategy,
strategy,
which is why using the scattergun is the best way to go about attacking them. You don't need to be accurate. But when firing against bigger enemies, like the metalhead grunts, it does a great job at stunning them by making them fly backwards a bit. So while they are getting up, you have a little extra time to take them out, or survey your surroundings and figure out the best strategy for the situation. So bottom line...
Okay, so yeah. Something I did fail to mention about the scattergun is the distance an enemy will fly back is dependent on how close they are when you shoot them. The closer they are, the further they're flung back. So if a metalhead grunt is like right in front of Jack and you fire with the scattergun, they're going to go back a long way. As opposed to like if they're at the very edge of the gun's range, they're going to just like kind of trip over in place. Which is something good to keep in mind.
The scattergun is good for taking out groups of enemies, especially the smaller ones. But because most of the bigger enemies go down in 2 hits, punching then firing is an effective strategy to deal with them quickly. If you find yourself never using the scattergun in your playthroughs, try experimenting with it a bit more. Next is the blaster.
Okay. One thing I just wanted to point out real quick. I read a whole paragraph here. I think the reason so many people claim it's the worst gun in the game is because their first impressions of it stick with them for the whole playthrough. That it's a slow gun that doesn't do much damage. Yes, at first it is rather slow, and the first mission the game gives you with the gun is against the lightning rod guys who have a ton of health. So this is definitely the game's fault for leaving a bad first impression. They should have either done the first mission the first mission, if the first mission was in the sewers, I think that would have been a better first impression. Or replace the lightning rod guys with normal metalhead grunts for the Sig mission. It seems a bit weird that the first mission you get to use a scattergun is against enemies that are not good to use the scattergun with. So, however, there are pretty objective use cases for the scattergun. For instance, the spinny guys at the drill platform, one shot and they're all gone. Or you could use the blaster and waste a bunch of shots because one, there's a lot of enemies and the blaster only kills 1 to 2 per shot, and 2, they're hard to aim at because they're small and quick. The scattergun is the better option, like we just demonstrated at the drill platform, yeah. And within the first act of the game, you get a rate of fire upgrade anyway, so the too slow complaint becomes invalid. This is something people also seem to forget, because by the time they get to that point, they're already jump, spin, shoot all the way. Yeah, so the too slow complaint is like not even valid at all at a certain point. Which is for most of the game. You get it like an hour or so after getting the gun.
The gun people say is the only useful one. And sure, it fits most combat encounters, but that doesn't make it the best option. This is the gun most people jump, spin, and shoot with. And like we said earlier, this move just isn't very reliable, and is downright terrible in
So I'm kind of exaggerating with this footage here, but you notice how I am like surrounded by a bunch of enemies, right? And I'm doing the jump, spin, shoot, but like so many of the shots are just like not
It fits most combat encounters.
So I start with 65 bullets.
That doesn't make it the best option. This is the gun most people jump, spin, and shoot with. And like we said earlier, this move just isn't very...
Okay, and there's one enemy left, so let's say 35 bullets. That's 30 bullets gone. Whereas I could have like hit all of them with like 5 scattergun shots.
Very reliable, and is downright terrible in certain scenarios. Let's discuss the strategy for a moment. The reason people think it's the best strategy is because it fires shots in all directions, and it also acts as a dodge, because you're up in the air, and any enemies that come close will get whacked with the spin kick. Sure, that sounds like a good strategy. Unfortunately, it's just not always effective. The biggest problem with it is the random nature of the attack. You have no control over where the bullets go, or what enemies you hit. You're leaving yourself at the game's mercy, instead of relying on your own skill. And it doesn't act as a very good dodge either. At least when it comes to ranged enemies, as they typically shoot you while you're in the air, so you're still very vulnerable. This is also a surefire way to get rid of all your ammo, and I don't think I need to tell you that's a bad thing. Like I said earlier, if you hit an enemy then...
Yeah, so my critique of the jump, spin, shoot is pretty solid. However, as I've been reminded of since the video released, I'm not showcasing the best version of the move. So let's jump over to the game. This is what I was talking about earlier with not being 100% honest in this video. So this is what I'm doing. I'm doing 3 button presses. I'm jumping, spinning, and then firing. Pretty much at once. Now, as so many comments in the video have gleefully told me, there's a better strategy to use, which is where you fire out 10 bullets. And you do that by jump, spin, shooting, and then you fire again just before you land. That fires out another 5 bullets. So what did I write here? So technically, this version of jump, spin, shoot has the highest damage per second in the game if you do it correctly. I've heard people write off this video of mine because even speedrunners do the move. And they do, but not like most people. They do the move like this, where you fire out 10 bullets instead of just 5. And if you watch it like a Jack to any percent, it's mostly at the final boss of the game because it's the highest damage per second. It's not used in like most combat encounters. However, even still, this is not the best move to use for the whole game. It is luck reliant. Not all enemies have enormous amounts of health that need to be drained as fast as possible, and it eats through ammo even quicker. So, if I'm just up against Crimson Guards... let's find a... Alright, let me just die. You know what? Let's jump towards Okay, so let's look at these Crimson Guards, right? 1, 2. 2 shots and they're dead. I could do this. Waste 10 bullets for guys that only take 2 shots to die. Or I could, like, use my guns better. And also your melee. Like, people seem to just, like, not use their melee. Or I could... Again, this is a good gun, like, because you don't need to really aim properly because it just sprays. And it stuns enemies really effectively. Or, you know, I could... It's actually really hard to do on this controller. Yeah, there. Just go through my entire ammo because I don't know how to use other guns. This version is... Oh, okay, so this version is also just as viable for being surrounded as the less effective method because this version only fires more shots in front of Jack, not around him. So, if I do this, it's firing shots around me, but if I do this, all the other new shots, the extra 5, are just shot in front of Jack. They're not also being shot all around me. So no matter if you're surrounded, either move is going to be just as viable. That more effective one is not more effective if you're surrounded because none of the extra shots are being thrown out around you, only in front of you. Oh, also, the jump spin shoot works also for the other guns, but differently. For the Vulcan, it starts firing at max speed, which is definitely useful because there's a few wasted bullets, since the same thing can be achieved by hitting an enemy, then firing. The move is not very useful with the scattergun or peacemaker. So yeah, I can also use jump spin shoot with the Vulcan. Yeah, it starts firing at max speed, but I waste a couple bullets when doing that. Or I could just hit an enemy and I've already like hit an enemy which is causing them damage, but I'm also getting that firing at max speed. I'd argue the jump spin shoot is more useful with the Vulcan because you're not wasting as many bullets as using the blaster. And you're getting that immediate rate of fire. Okay, let's get back to the video.
Fire, you'll send out 3 shots at once, which devastates most enemies. When using the blaster, this is the strategy you want to use for most of the time. It's also the best gun to use at long range, so if you want to pick off enemies from a distance, use this gun normally. So
I didn't really go into depth with this because the aiming in Jak 2 is admittedly pretty weird. The thing is, with Jak 2, like, with the aiming, the auto-aim doesn't really update unless Jak moves. So hold on, I kind of got to demonstrate this. So the best way to really, so if I stand still, hold on. If I stand still, he's going to keep shooting without updating where the enemy is. What I kind of have to do, hold on, I need ammo. Ugh. What I need to do is like kind of nudge Jak forward a little bit, because that will then reset his auto aim and update it to wherever the next enemy is. Sometimes it does update on its own, but you kind of got to do that sort of thing. If you just run forwards or walk forwards, he will update the auto aim on his own. But if you're like trying to aim like this, like you're turning Jak all over the place, that's not really going to help a whole lot. Because the auto aim can't update like as fast as Jak can move. Yeah.
While this gun can fit any combat encounter, I'd save it for the medium to larger sized enemies, like Crimson Guards or Grunts. The Vulcan Fury is a gun that can see heaps of use, but can also fall by the wayside. The reason is it can be switched out with the blaster in most occasions. There are definitely times when using one or the other is more useful, but for the most part, you can switch them out whenever. It just depends on your playstyle. Here are some times when...
I don't really agree with this assessment of the Vulcan. It functions much differently to the blaster, so using it in similar scenarios is not always the best. The Vulcan is great for hordes of enemies in front of you, like Crimson Guards, as spraying it will stun them very effectively, preventing them from landing an attack. Using the blaster to do the same is nowhere near as easy and much more time consuming. The Vulcan is also easier to land shots because of the spraying bullets, so accuracy isn't as necessary, though still preferred, as you don't want to be wasting ammo.
using the Vulcan is preferred. When against these guys, the sling block.
In the video, I don't really talk about like hordes of enemies and like the accuracy side of it. I mainly talk about like the enemies that have like a lot of health, like the sling blasters. Yeah. I do have a Twitch account. I'm streaming to Twitch right now, actually, as well as YouTube.
You'll want to use the Vulcan every time. These guys shoot pretty long range, they have pretty good aim, and they take a lot of hits. So the optimal way to deal with these guys is to stun lock them with the Vulcan and rip into them. When shooting an enemy with the Vulcan, it stun locks them, which prevents them from counterattacking. These guys are usually in groups of enemies as well, so if you spray the Vulcan everywhere, each bullet will temporarily stun each enemy, making it harder for them to reach you, while also causing them damage. The Vulcan is also good for groups of bigger enemies. Crimson Guards and Spider Gunners are good to use the Vulcan against, as the stun lock capability of the gun works wonders against them, especially when they're in groups, and especially since they're long range enemies. The Vulcan can...
So, yeah, I don't know why I said that the Vulcan can like be switched out with the blaster in most scenarios when I just listed off like a bunch of like really objectively good use cases for the Vulcan. I kind of just contradicted myself there. I'm not really sure why I did that. I think it was an attempt at like appearing like balanced or whatever. Oh yeah, like the Vulcan is really good, but you can switch it out with the blaster. It just depends on your playstyle, which I guess is true, but like there are plenty of scenarios where using the Vulcan is much better than the blaster.
Can also be used against groups of one-hit enemies like the scattergun, but that's usually a waste of ammo.
Yeah, I never use it
The
like
last
that.
gun to look at is the Peacemaker. Unfortunately, this gun doesn't see too much use. There's no real strategy to using this one like the other three. You kinda just use it when you're in a tight spot, or you need to preserve ammo. But it is a crazy powerful weapon, taking out most enemies in one hit. So in the later stages of the game, if there's a ton of enemies, the Peacemaker is something to consider using.
So yeah, the Peacemaker is great for enemies that are hard to aim at, like the bouncy guys shown in this clip. Yeah, in the Metalhead Nest. Otherwise, it really is a gun that's used in tight spots for guaranteed damage. Not a bad thing though, if we compare it to the BFG from Doom, which has a similar function and similar ammo restrictions. It has a similar strategy as well. No clear-cut use cases, but very useful in tough spots.
Just don't use it against these guys, as it doesn't do much damage, if any.
It does do
also,
damage,
just be
but
careful,
not much.
as ammo for this one can be a bit...
It does like do a tiny bit of damage on these guys. Well, I don't know about a tiny bit, but like less than the Peacemaker usually does. And it also doesn't chain it just doesn't chain the electricity, so...
rare compared to the other guns. So there's all the guns. Now what I want to do is show you a specific mission and walk you through how to deal with it using this new knowledge. One of the hardest missions I had to get through when I played through the game only jump spin shooting was protect site in Dead Town. I spent so long on this mission, I kept running out of ammo, a lot of my shots were missing the targets, and I was getting creamed. When capturing footage for this video, it took me over 40 minutes to beat this mission using this strategy. So let's take a quick look at what this looks like.
I will say, these dramatic deaths, they weren't staged. This mission is genuinely very hard to do with just the move. But in a situation like this, most... Hold on. Like here, most people, like, doing these critique videos saying jump, spin, shoot is the best, probably would just lay into him with the Vulcan here. So, I am being a bit facetious here, but my point stands still, I think. Look at this. I'm already out of ammo. Jesus.
Now let's walk through this stage, using our new knowledge of how to use the guns. First up are these stingers. There's a small group of them, so
I don't really have a lot to say about this part. It's basically just going through the mission, enemy by enemy, and saying what the... Man, that chainsaw guy is really annoying, hey. Can you guys hear that? Jesus fucking Christ. I don't have a lot to say about this section of the video because I'm just going enemy by enemy. What the best gun to use is and best strategy. I think this is the best part of the video, if I'm being honest, because it's a really good showcase of how good the enemy and level design is. This is a very well put together mission. Chainsaw Man in the stream, Mal. Yeah, but there was one spot.
As they'll almost for cover. Use these. You'll want to make your way as close to the gunner as you can. This makes it a lot easier to get an accurate aim at him. You'll want to use the Vulcan again as you want to stun him. Make your way around these pillars, killing any stingers you come across, then take him out. You can just start shooting at him from a distance. That does work, but because the auto aim is a bit hit or miss, especially with the Vulcan, it's pretty easy to miss him and get creamed by his fast firing shots.
So yeah, I didn't really go into detail about why that's the case. The main reason the Vulcan auto-aim is worse than the blaster is because of how Jack holds the gun lower to the ground. So the aim bounces around a lot more than the blaster does.
Next, a group of grunts will come at you all at once. You can either keep using the Vulcan or use the blaster's Wastelander move. I personally use the blaster here to try and preserve my Vulcan ammo, but if you have enough ammo to use, then use it by all means. Just make sure you bait them out of this doorway, because hiding around the corner is another gunner who will tear you up fast. Once the grunts are taken care of, get out your Vulcan. What I like to do is start firing for a second before walking into the room and aiming for him. That way, the shots have already started speeding up by the time they hit him, and I also find it easier to aim this way. After he's taken care of, there's another one around the corner at the top of some stairs. Do the same thing you just did before. Maybe jump around a bit to try and avoid his shots, but make sure you're still facing him. After this...
Okay, so this part is some admittedly cheap enemy placement. The player isn't going to know these guys like the first time through, and there is little time to react, especially if the grunts are still alive, if you didn't bait them out of the doorway. The strategy I provide comes from an experienced player's experience, which goes against what this walkthrough is trying to do, which is show how to approach this mission with proper strategy. Prior knowledge of the level layout should not be in consideration. Yeah, I don't like the fact that I did that. That like fire a second before going around the corner. Yeah, that's not very good advice, because like that requires prior knowledge, you know? Yeah, not good. That being said, a bit of imbalance and surprise enemy placement goes a long way in making the mission feel more dangerous and keeping the player on edge. It does make the mission harder, but I think presenting challenge like this is not inherently a bad thing. If the game was full of moments like this, I'd probably be a lot more critical of this part of the design. But moments like this are rare, so I don't think it's a big deal. It's not exactly 100% fair, but it serves as a reminder to stay on alert, take your time, and test the player's reflexes. So yeah, I don't have a huge problem with the enemy placement there, but I wouldn't blame someone for calling it cheap, because it kind of is, but it kind of serves a greater purpose, which I think is okay.
We'll enter a room with some grunts that will try to flank you. Get out the blaster and Wastelander suckers. Be careful not to miss any of these guys, they can sneak up on you. Just do a quick check of the room before you leave. Get out your scattergun before you leave, as these stingers can also sneak up.
I don't really think I have a whole lot more to say on this part. And then I just play through the mission, so I guess I will skip to where I start talking again. Not really much to fault there. I don't think there's really anything wrong with making a player perform more than one level attempt. On a second try, they know about the corner. I think there is a lot of value in constructing an action game in a way that it is possible for a player to overcome a challenge without dying and without taking any damage. In a first-person shooter with hit-scan enemies, you're going to be taking damage no matter what. It's not really avoidable. It's just limiting how much you do take. In an action game like this, or like Devil May Cry, for example, I think there's a lot of value in constructing it where if you are good enough, you can get through it without being hit or taking damage. I guess that's more for an experienced player's perspective, but for a first-timer, I think there is value in constructing missions where it is possible for them to beat it the first time through without any prior knowledge. And while that is the case for this mission, enemy placement like this does make that a bit harder. But again, I don't think it's a huge deal. It reinforces the fact the player needs to stay on edge and not rush through things. But I wouldn't blame people for calling that cheap, because it kind of definitionally is.
Now, I didn't plan out this strategy for the whole mission, I just observed my surroundings and what enemy types I'm going up against, and changed my strategy accordingly. This is the same for every mission. I don't have anything pre-planned, everything is just observation and knowing what to do.
Okay, so fun fact, this whole part of the script where I'm going through every detail of this mission was written completely from memory. I didn't sit down with the game on and like writing down what my strategy was. I just visualized each part of the mission and remembered what my strategy usually is in this mission. Not really anything, important to the analysis of this video, but I thought it's just like a cool little thing.
Before we wrap this up, here are some other tips. I didn't talk about Crimson Guards in this video, but they are pretty dangerous in groups, which is why the docks mission is so hard. It was one of the hardest missions in the game using this strategy. It took me at least an hour. Here is how to deal with Crimson Guards. What you need to know about them is every guard's first few shots will miss. It's the third or fourth shot that will be a guaranteed hit. So what you need to do in this mission especially is take note of the bullets that fly past you and determine what direction they're coming from. Make sure you take out the guard that's firing them before they manage to land a hit. Basically, the whole mission consists of making sure that
using the map is also essential in this mission and other missions that deal with Crimson Guards. So, yeah, using the map is actually a really important thing in this game because you can't really tell what's behind you. So you need to rely on this to like tell you what is behind you and so you can react. If you are good enough, you'll react fast enough, but you still can beat it the first time without damage. But I guess it can be cheap if you're coping. Yeah, true. Yeah, I totally agree. I wouldn't blame anyone for like saying that's cheap enemy placement because it kind of is. But again, like it's you can deal with it if you weren't aware of it.
no guards close to you who can damage you, and managing all the guards around you, making sure you don't focus on one.
Basically, this mission is just 100% crowd control.
But rather, periodically focusing on every group so they don't land any hits. I hope I explained this well. The footage you're seeing now should make it easier to understand. I found this mission suits the blaster and especially the Vulcan pretty well, but I haven't experimented with the scattergun much. Just thinking about it, it would be a cool strategy to blast the whole group of guards straight into the water. You guys can experiment. Let me know how it goes.
Yes, this is actually a very good strategy, and I use it every time now. Using the scattergun is excellent because, like, when there's a group, one shot with the scattergun and a whole group just goes flying into the water. It's extremely ammo efficient and a very good strategy. But, you know, scattergun is the worst in the game.
Some other general tips are, if you're in a cinch, punching is a great way to get some distance between you and your enemies, while doubling as an attack. Make sure you hold the square button.
So something I didn't really talk about much in this video is like how to like keep your distance from enemies. Like ways of Jack's movement. Because there isn't any strafing in the game, you can't like run backwards like you would in like a Ratchet and Clank game to keep your distance. You do need to turn Jack around and then turn him back around in order to keep firing. I didn't really talk about that. I talk about it briefly here, but yeah, punching is a really good way of like getting distance towards an enemy and getting distance away, because it's not as like dangerous as a roll jump where like it's possible for you to like roll jump off a ledge or something like that, and it doesn't go as far as a roll jump. And also, like, if there's an enemy behind you, you can, like, if you're punching, you'll just hit them and you won't take any damage. Whereas if you're roll jumping, you'll get hit. So punching very good.
Instead of just pressing it, otherwise you won't go very far. And to add to this point, don't forget about your melee attacks. Sometimes using your gun isn't necessary. For instance, if you've just fired off a bunch of scattergun rounds on some stingers, but there's only one left running towards you, just hit it. It'll save you ammo.
Also, the fact that we watched like all those videos earlier, so much of that footage had like enemies right next to them, and they were still trying to shoot them. Hitting them is really effective at like getting them off your ass. I don't know why people forget that they have punches and kicks in this game. It's a bit frustrating. So that's also a really good thing.
Also, just being very aware of your surroundings is very important. If the mission has stingers that spawn, like the strip mine for instance, being very aware of what's behind you is important. Also, listen for any enemies, as they all make themselves known through sound. Okay, so before I wrap this up, I do need to acknowledge a few things. One is, yes, I have played the game hundreds of times, so I have each mission and enemy placement memorized, so it could look like I'm making it look easier than it really is. But I don't agree with this statement, for the most part. Yes, my prior knowledge would help in certain scenarios, like here in Deadtown, these gunners are hiding around the corner. But it only takes a new player a single encounter with the enemy for them to know the gunner is hiding there. Secondly...
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes, the game doesn't do a good job at all of teaching you this hidden combat depth. It does teach you the Wastelander move very briefly, but if they had a specific enemy type that needed to be taken down with the move, that would have really cemented the move into the player's mind. Thirdly,
This is true, however, I don't think it's necessary. I think the game killing you so often is enough of an incentive to like try out other strategies, you know. I think the tutorial, I honestly don't know if it's the tutorial's fault or like everyone playing this game's fault that like no one knows about the Wastelander move, you know. It teaches you how to do it. You can't progress without doing it. But people assume that's the jump, spin, shoot move, but no, it's the spin, shoot move. It's infinitely more useful. Yeah, I don't know if it's the game's fault for being a bad tutorial or if it's everyone else's fault for not like registering that's a move. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is there. Like, everyone needs to be taught the move in order to progress. I don't know why everyone just doesn't use it when it's so useful.
Saying this is
or even talk about it in their reviews, you know, like surely if you're going over the guns and like their use cases and what makes them good or bad, you would talk about like their uses, you know, like their capabilities, but no one brings up the fact that you can hit the enemy and fire and it does cool shit, you know. Ugh.
The only way anyone should play Jak 2. You can play the game however you like. Hell, I've beaten it with no guns a couple times, before Keith ever did too. If all you want to do is jump, spin, shoot, and you're having a great time, then by all means, play that way. This is mostly to show everyone the hidden depth of Jak 2's combat, and for anyone who struggles with the combat, or doesn't find just jump, spin, shooting very fun. So, I encourage all of you to take these tips on how to use each gun, and apply it to your own playthroughs. And again, there's no optimal strategy for every mission. You can experiment and play around with your own strategies that suit you better. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I really hope you'll start trying to play like this. Weapon switching in appropriate situations is so much fun, and is why I love Doom Eternal so much. Let me know how you guys go in the comments below. I'd love to hear your experiences with this playstyle. But just let me reiterate this point.
This is sped up
Jak 2 is
1.25.
deeper than most people think if you put in the effort, and I strongly encourage you to. Cheers for watching everyone, subscribe if you're new and you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.
Nice meme. Real quick, I just wanted to show something because I was very proud of putting this in the video. Okay, I just beat the docks mission, and as you can see, I have full health because I'm just that good at the game. But also,
Now the real question is, how the fuck do you play Jak 3 correctly?
true. Right. Jak 3 bad. Okay. So that's the video. I went over it. It's got issues. One thing I didn't address. So this is a problem I have with the video is that, and a problem I have with like a lot of positions I used to hold in like a lot of aspects. I would criticize people for holding certain positions, but I wouldn't try and understand why those positions are held, right? So in the case of jump, spin, shoot, I'd just be like, oh, these guys, like, I don't know what their problem is. They're just dumb. They're not using the proper strategies. They just think this one move is the only good one. But I didn't like try and like get to the core of like why people come to hold these opinions. So what leads people to using this strategy? Well, it's a fairly simple move to pull off, and it definitely can be useful. Experimenting with weapons takes time and effort, but if this other move is proven useful, why bother trying anything else? This leads to players inevitably getting stuck on missions where the move isn't useful, but because they haven't taken the time to get to grips with all the other guns, they just brute force their way through these missions with the jump, spin, shoot. As demonstrated by Mighty Nifty's video where he's like, you know, you've got the winning strategy, why aren't I winning? If players could use each death as a learning opportunity, they'd come to realize that each gun has their use cases. Thank you, Untitled Gem, for the funds for Jak 5. I appreciate that. That's pretty much all I got. I have issues with this video. It's not written very well. I wish I was a bit more objective about everything. If I was going to use other people's positions, I would have preferred to use their actual videos in my video instead of constructing a straw man position and attacking that. Not very good writing. Good tip for all yous out there. And then a lot of the comments really blows my mind how people couldn't figure this out. I figured out these tips just by playing with the combat. The hardest part of the game was driving hoverboard. There's a lot of comments like this. This one's fine. I noticed a lot of them are pretty condescending to like people who do struggle with the game, which I didn't want that to be the case, you know. Decided to replay Jak 2 with the strategy in mind. Not only was the game much easier to play, but it felt more natural and most importantly fun. This is as many problems as I do have with the video, this is the sort of shit I love to see. People actually being like, oh shit, there's other ways to play the game, we'll give it a shot. Oh shit, the game's a lot better. How about that? Who would have thought that using the mechanics as intended would make for a more fun experience, you know? Recently did a playthrough of the first 3 games, and I specifically tried to avoid spin shoot playstyle and was amazed at how versatile the other guns were when you actually use them. Exactly. There was a few comments on this video hypothesizing the reason people gravitate to this strategy is that they play Jack 3 first, and the beam reflex jump spin shoot is objectively the best strategy. So maybe they just like took that strategy to Jack 2 where it doesn't work as well. Maybe there's undoubtedly some people who are like that. There's also a lot of people saying, well, yeah, there was a few people saying like they watch like people on the internet do jump spin shoot and then they copy that, which yeah, I guess is possible. It's kind of the reason I wanted to like do this sort of takedown of these other videos, because like it's kind of spreading like the whole jump spin shoot is the only good strategy, and then people who haven't actually played the game would be like, wow, Jack 2 is bad because all you do is the one strategy. And it's like, no, you're wrong. Yeah, that's my takedown. This guy sucks. Go subscribe.